Hey everybody, I'm DJ Sixsmith. You watch The Sit Down. Chris Wallace is here with us. Countdown Bin Laden, his brand new book from Simon & Schuster. Chris, really nice to meet you. How are you?
I'm great, and thank you so much for talking with me, DJ.
You got it. So it's obviously a really important time with the 20th anniversary of September 11th coming up. And this is a book you worked on for a really long time. You interviewed a bunch of different folks, and you really go into the nuts and bolts of those final 8 months and tracking down Osama bin Laden. So what was it like putting this one together?
Well, it was interesting. I had written another book called Countdown. First of all, the concept, countdown. You know, I think so many history books are written, well, we know what happened. Why did it happen? Well, the point is that the key players, when it was happening, didn't know what was going to happen. They were living with all the uncertainty, all of the doubts, all the questions. And so the first book I wrote last year was called Countdown 1945, about Harry Truman's decision to drop the atomic bomb on Hiroshima. And I loved the research. I loved, you know, the getting the history books, the diaries, the letters, the memoirs. But as a reporter, which is my day job, I was so frustrated because I wanted to say, well, what did you think? And how did you feel? And what was going through your mind? And so when I came up with the idea of Countdown bin Laden, I thought, I'm going to get to ask people that. And almost everybody who was involved in the decision, from CIA Director Leon Panetta to all the top people in the White House, to Admiral William McRaven, who was the head of Joint Special Operations Command, to a couple of the SEALs, SEAL Team 6, who were on the raid, including the man, Rob O'Neill, who actually killed bin Laden. I interviewed them all at great length and was able to ask them, you know, at this point, what did you feel? And the book is written in that way. It starts on August 27th, 2010, when a couple of people come into Panetta's office at the CIA and say, we have a lead about where bin Laden might be. And it goes right on through all the meetings at the White House, all the rehearsals by the SEAL Team 6, and then on the helicopter to the compound and climbing up the stairs to the 3rd floor.
So there's a lot that's known about this time in history, but there was a lot that was still personal and private to a lot of these folks. So you've been around this for such a long time in your job. What blew your mind the most? What surprised you the most in your research?
There was a lot. And you know, I think I had an advantage, DJ, because there were a lot of books written in the year or two after, but a lot of these folks were still in office then. Much of this was very highly classified. Also, when they wrote their memoirs, they would devote one chapter to this raid, and I wanted to write a whole book about it. So I learned all kinds of things. Just to take one example, when I talked to a couple of the SEALs, including Rob O'Neill, they said, I remember the first time he said it, he said, I view this as a one-way ticket. And I thought I got it, but I was like, what? He said, oh yeah, this was a suicide mission. If bin Laden was there was no chance that we were coming home alive. Either the entire compound was going to be booby trapped, or when we went up the stairs in the main house where we thought bin Laden was, that there would be all kinds of al-Qaeda bodyguards who would throw all kinds of stuff at us. So we might take out bin Laden, but we weren't coming home alive. Another thing is, you know, they never had a hard, firm case that bin Laden was in the compound. It was always circumstantial. Well, there's this guy there, a guy who used to work as his courier there. They're very secretive there, but they never had a positive ID. Osama bin Laden is living in that compound, and they went around the room, in the Situation Room, the final day, April 28th of 2011, Thursday afternoon, and Obama's asking all of his top people, Biden against doing the raid, Bob Gates, the Secretary of Defense, against doing the raid, and on and on. And some of them were saying, well, there's a 30% chance, there's a 70% chance. And at one point, the president looks over at the deputy CIA director, a fellow named Mike Morrell, and he says, explain all these different percentages. And he said, well, look, you know, it depends on where you've been and how much success you've had. But he said, honestly, the case that there were weapons of mass destruction in Iraq when we invaded, that Saddam Hussein had weapons, that case is stronger than this one. And there was absolute silence in the room, and everybody thought, oh my God, if the case for the weapons of mass destruction, which didn't turn out to be true, is stronger, he's never going to do it. And the president, who was probably the smartest consumer of intelligence and information in the room, said, look, guys, this is a 50-50 proposition. He's either there or he's not there. And then he said, and I'll let you know in the morning. He went up to his family quarters. He had a basketball game on, the Lakers and Kobe Bryant playing the Charlotte Hornets. He stayed up late at night, thought about it. The next morning came down and said to his top aides, it's a go.
You spoke to Defense Secretary Gates, so you just mentioned that he was against it. Did you press him on that? What did you learn when you talked to him?
Well, it's so interesting. When they had this key meeting on April 28th in the Situation Room in the White House, Tom Donilon, who was the National Security Advisor, said to me, history was in the room. And I didn't fully understand what he meant, but what he was basically saying is that everybody came to this moment with their own experiences, and nobody came to it with more experiences than Bob Gates. Because back in 1980, remember when the U.S. hostages had been taken by Ayatollah Khomeini and the Iranians, and they were being held for 400 days. At one point, Jimmy Carter decides he's going to launch a rescue mission. It was called Eagle Claw. And they had these helicopters and they had these transport planes, and they all end up meeting at a place called Desert One in the middle of the desert in Iran. And there's a sandstorm, and they all, at various points, the helicopter crashes in to one of the C-130s, and 8 people are killed, and it's a complete disaster. They don't even get to Tehran. They don't rescue anybody. 8 Americans are killed. And I think it played a role in Jimmy Carter not getting reelected. Bob Gates, his view was, in something this complicated, something always goes wrong. And unless you have absolute certainty that it's worth doing the mission, don't risk it. So he was against it because he just thought, from his experience, history was in the room. You do one of these missions, something's going to go wrong.
So you have all these stories around President Obama at that time, even the details of watching that basketball game. If you had spoken to him, what would you have wanted to focus on? What's something you'd still like to ask him about that moment in history?
Well, he was really the only person I wanted to talk to who I didn't get to. He had just written his memoir, and his people said he's going to let that speak for itself. One of the interesting things, there are several stars, if you will, main characters in this book. Leon Panetta, the CIA director, who's this big, gruff, affable, big emotions, Italian, very wily Washington hand. Admiral McRaven, the head of Joint Special Operations Command, he's like Captain America. Obama obviously is the president, but where all these other people had, very defined and colorful personalities and big emotions, Obama was kind of closed off. He would ask questions, but there were not big highs, there were not big lows. It was no drama Obama. It's what you see is what you get. And if I'd had the opportunity, I pressed with some of his top people, his national security advisor, Tom Donilon, his top counterterrorism advisor, John Brennan. It was, what was the interior conversation? I know he didn't show much. He's a good poker player, but what was going on in his head? I don't know whether I would have gotten much more than that, because after the book was written, I did get to talk to Obama and asked him a little. And, I think he was very good, very precise. He took the information, he sifted it, he analyzed it, and he made his decision. But I don't think he had as many emotions and doubts and ups and downs as a lot of the other people on the team.
So this book comes out at a really interesting time, 20th anniversary of September 11th, everything that's happened in Afghanistan in the last couple of weeks. What are some of the main thoughts that are on your mind, whether it's about 20 years since 9/11 or everything that's happened in Afghanistan recently?
No, it's a very good question. And obviously I had planned the book to come out on the 20th anniversary of 9/11, but it never occurred to me until 3 weeks ago that the people in charge of Afghanistan on 9/11, the Taliban, would be in charge of Afghanistan on 9/11/2021. And, I think there are 2 points that resonate for me about this book, given the events of the last few weeks. One, a lot of people feel badly about our decision, not necessarily the decision to get out, the policy decision, but the way we got out, the fact that Americans have been left behind, the fact that thousands of our Afghan allies have been left behind. And I think it's important to remember that during our 20 years, we did a lot of really important and good things in Afghanistan. And the takedown of bin Laden may have been the best. Remember, that's why we got into Afghanistan 20 years ago in the first place, was one, to get the person who had killed 3,000 Americans, 2, to severely degrade or put Al-Qaeda out of business, and three, to make sure that there was not another attack on the U.S. homeland that came from Afghanistan. And with this raid and what followed from it, we did all three of those things. The other point I guess I'd make, DJ, is, again, this is my opinion, but I feel that there was a lot of mismanagement in the way that this withdrawal was conducted. Not necessarily the decision to pull out, but the intel about how quickly the Taliban was going to take over, the presidential decision making in the White House, the military, and the fact that they pulled out and then had to put thousands of people back in. If that's a case study of how not to do it, this is a case study of how to do it, because this was a perfect meshing of the intel, political, and military communities. It was the American government working at its best, without ego, without turf, completely cooperating, only, no concern about who got the credit, just let's do the mission. And I think that's kind of a good story for us to be reading right now.
Yeah, this one was a little bit more airtight than what we've seen recently. And it's a story that we're going to be talking about for a really long time. So Chris, thank you so much for the time. Looking forward to reading the book, and we'll chat again down the road, all right?
Thank you. Thanks so much. And thank you. I hope guys will read it. I promise you, it's a history thriller. You know how the story ends, but the last 100 pages, you'll be on the edge of your seat going, what happens next? I promise.